Are you looking for simple and affordable ways to boost soil fertility as well as reduce farming costs? In today's video, we will see how you can turn your farm and kitchen waste into black gold using worms in a process called vermicomposting. My name is Eunice Karanja, the farmer's friend, and in this channel I showcase practical solutions to every farmer geared towards increasing production and profitability. I also like incorporating women and youth in agriculture. So let's begin. What is this vermicomposting? Vermicomposting is simply taking your farm and kitchen waste and turning it into compost or organic manure using the worms. The worms helps in the decomposition process. To be able to understand this process further and how we can have it in our farms, we visited a young farmer who will help us understand the process of rearing the vermiworms.
My name is George Muturi Kamau from Comfort Worms and Insects based in Kiambu County. And here we are at a unit where we are doing vermicomposting. And we have vermiculture and vermicomposting. So we say vermiculture is the art of rearing earthworms. So different types for different purposes. And one of the purposes is vermicomposting, now which we are doing here. That is basically turning waste, a variety of waste. That is plant waste, fruits, vegetable waste, animal waste, turning that into a resource which we call vermicompost, which is an organic fertilizer or an organic compost, which now at the end of the whole process we use as a fertilizer during planting or top dressing. So now the whole process entails a number of things. One, putting the whole structure in place. And the structure is just what we are seeing around here. So now the structure, one, there are two things when we look at the structure. One, we look at the outer structure, which now protect the worms from rain, from sunshine, from predators. That is one. Second, we have now the second structure where now we house the worms, or where we put the worms. And now the second structure is what we call the vermi beds or the bins, depending on the type of structure we are using. So in here we have the beds, which a bed is made out of timber. We have others which are made out of metallic. And ideally these beds are made to just hold the waste or the materials that we are composting plus the worms. And we make the beds in different sizes. Like the ones we have here, it's a 2.5 feet by 7 feet by a depth of 1 foot or 30 centimeters. And in this one unit, in this one bed, that is where now we are going to place in the variety of waste which we are going to use for our composting purposes. Then now the outer structure is where we are making just a shed. Then on the sides we have options of the materials that we can be able to use. We can use the offcuts, timber, we can use a shade net, just to make sure that we protect the worms from the harsh weather conditions, predators from outside there. So when we are doing our structuring bit, that is what we have to put in place or look at, so that now we can be able to house our worms and be able to do now our composting. Then now once we have this in place, now we come in with the materials that we need to use for composting. And ideally, we need to have at least 3 different varieties of materials that we are going to use. One, we need to use dry matter. That is a source of carbon. We can use leaves from trees like avocado, graveria, basically trees that we can incorporate in the farm. So those are the best types of trees to use. If we are not having the leaves, we can use hay, such kind of materials. Then that is the first thing. The second thing, we need to have animal waste or animal droppings. So there we come in with cow dung, sheep, rabbit droppings, pig droppings, but we exclude chicken droppings. And the whole purpose of why we don't use chicken droppings is the aspect of acidity. So worms do not like an acidic environment. And also when we are using all these other types of manure, we have to make sure that it's not acidic. So ideally, we cannot use it when it's very fresh. We need to have it a little bit composted or broken down to make sure that the excess acid has been released, or ammonia, basically ammonia has been released. So that is the type of manure that we can be able to use as the second item. Then the third item that which we use, we need to have a variety of green waste. So green waste is basically a good source of nitrogen. So we do select, because you cannot just select any kind of green waste, but we say any green waste that has very soft leaves is very good for the worms, because once we cut this kind of leaves, they will immediately start breaking down or decomposing, which makes it easy for the worms even to feed on this type of green waste. And in these varieties, we do also select, we say we can use Russian comfrey, which is a vegetable. We call it mafake. We can use Tithonia diversifolia. We can use Lantana camara. So these are some of the types of green waste or green material that we can use as the third item when now we are doing our worms or our vermicomposting. And just the way I have mentioned them, from the dry matter, the manure, the green waste, that is how we arrange them in terms of layers in our bed. Then now once we have done that, we introduce our worms, because the worms, you have to introduce them. They won't just come by themselves. So you introduce the worms in that bin or in that bed. And ideally, there is the standard amount that we say we need to introduce per specific space. So if we are doing 1 meter by 1 meter, we say we need to introduce 2 kgs of worms. So within the bed that I have mentioned of 7 feet by 2.5, we normally introduce at least 5 kgs, so that now they can be able to start breaking down these material within the period that we are targeting, because majorly we don't just put it there and leave it without looking at our timelines. So once we do the whole setup, we introduce the 5 kgs of worms, we need to give them a period of 6 to 8 weeks. So that is ideally 2 months. After 2 months, the worms will have broken down the materials that we fed them, and now we'll be ready to come and start harvesting or separating the worms from the fine compost. And there are 3 indicators or 3 things that we have to look at so that we know, is our compost ready? We need to give it some more time, because at times it may also take a little bit more time than the 2 months. But if we look at these 3 indicators and see that they are okay, now we can be able to harvest our compost. And one, we look at the texture. So if our compost is very fine, it means that the texture is okay for sieving or for separating. Second, if the moisture. So when we were introducing our materials, one thing that we look at the moisture. And just for a normal farmer, there is a normal farmer's test that we say. A farmer needs to hold their manure, squeeze it by the hand, and if they see some drops of water, it means that manure is good and it will last you for the 6 weeks to 8 weeks without adding any water. So when we are coming now on the 8th week, if you squeeze your manure, it should not give any water. So, and when you release it, it should not be left clumped together, so it should break. So if you see that, it means if we put it through the sieve, also it will go through the sieve. Then the third thing is the kara. So the kara is also very important because it tells us if the compost was well broken down or it's not yet broken down well. Ideally, when we are putting in the manure, just the way I mentioned them, from the dry matter is brown. The manure mostly will be a little bit greenish. Then also the green matter, that one will be green. But by the time it's through, it should be dark or dark brown. So if you see it has those 3 indicators, they are matching that way. So our compost is ready, and now we can harvest it and take it now direct to the sieving process. So now that period takes us a period of 8 weeks, 2 months. So 2 months from when we introduced or when we fed the worms, that is 8 weeks, 2 months. Now we can be able to start harvesting our compost. And it is pretty easy because there are 2 ways which we use for sieving. One, we have a sieve for bigger capacities. We have a sieve where we now put in the worms plus everything or the compost. So the sieves will help us to separate the fine compost and any uncomposted materials plus now the worms. Then now we can return the worms back and continue with the process of feeding them. So once we do that, now we start the whole process again of now feeding, pressing that in layers, then all that is set. So now once we have our compost, we say we'll harvest a very fine compost. And now this fine compost is ready for use in the farm, just the way it is, because we were looking at a point where we'll turn the waste into now the fine compost. And now the fine compost comes in with a number of advantages or reasons why we were doing all this. One, we are looking at the nutrients availability for the plant. So if we are using the raw manure, the uncomposted manure, basically we are not having the nutrients readily available for the plant for that season. So one, we are looking at the nutrient availability for the plant. Second, after looking at this compost compared with a number of other materials or manure, compost, we see that vermicompost has a higher water retention capacity than any other compost that we are using. So because of now the process it underwent, that is the worms eating, excreting, so it makes it to be like some balls which hold the water very well for the plant. So even during the dry season, you will use this compost and find that you are not using too much water in watering your plants. Then now the other thing, we find that naturally it makes the plants to be very healthy and repellent even to some insects, just because of the science behind the worms feeding, excreting, adding some enzymes into it. So it makes it to be a much better compost than just using the normal compost or the raw uncomposted manure. Because ideally, we advise farmers not to use the uncomposted manure. Not to use, because you find that they are just transferring. If there was any disease that maybe was in the waste that the cows fed or the materials that the cows fed, that will go back into the soil. So this is a better way of managing or working on your manure or your waste than having the final product as the vermicompost, which now gets to help you in terms of saving your costs of buying the inputs that you are buying. If you are buying the fertilizers, we are not saying that you replace 100%, you do 100%, but you find that with the vermicompost, you are coming into a point where you are reducing the amount of the fertilizers you are using. The aspect of making the plant to be healthy, you are reducing the inputs in terms of chemicals that you are spraying on your farm. So you find that you are saving some cost by just using the vermicompost. And this is a model that a farmer can be able to do very easily. Because as far as you have the waste, you have the materials to construct, we come in with the technology to help you establish, get the farm, the worms, then the whole process gets to be very easy, very manageable, and then now you can be able to run from there. And also to the young people, we find that this is an opportunity that we have, because this is an upcoming technology. You find that the demand now has been going up of the vermicompost. Currently, we are producing vermicompost for sale, even to other farms. And we find that we are not yet meeting the demand that is out there, because the demand is going higher as time goes by. And as farmers run, as they understand what it has, how it's working, so you find that the demand is going high. So there is a very big opportunity even for young people to come in, to produce, to come in different sectors or within the ecosystem. You can come in as a producer, you can come in as a marketer, you can come in just within this system. So there are a number of opportunities in here. So it's something that I can even encourage the young people to join in, to produce, and the market is there. Yeah.
So, my farmer friends, we have seen vermiculture, we have seen vermicomposting, and you could be asking, where do I begin? As usual, in the Farmer's Friend YouTube channel, I like offering practical solutions, and we always start with what we have before we go to what we need to buy. And so to be able to establish a vermicomposting unit, you can start simply like we see here. This is a 200-liter water tank that has been cut into two, and it has formed this big trough here. And so what you do, you bring in your compost here, you arrange it like George explained earlier, and then you bring in your red worms here, and they will be doing the decomposting of the kitchen and the farm waste. Like you can see here, there is the raw waste here, there are some kitchen waste here, and we can see that the worms are really working on this compost, and you can see here a combination of the worms and the compost that is processing, and within a couple of days we will be having our organic waste. So the second option, you can get a 50-liter bin like you see here. You introduce your kitchen waste like we explained earlier, then you bring in the worms and cover. So this will take about 2 months. When you have brought in the worms, they will do the decomposting process, and after 2 months you will have your organic manure. Option number 3 is you can assemble a simple homemade vermicomposting unit. To be able to do this, you will need 3 buckets, 3 17 kg, we call them 17 kg. This one, 17 kg bucket. You will have 3 of these. So you will have the first one, this one, that later you will put a small tap here. I will explain the purpose of this tap later. And then you have 2 of them here, and you can drill in some holes here. That is one. And then the second one, you have to drill in some holes here. So how you do this is you have your first bucket with no holes but has a tap here, and then you have this second one. In this second one, you don't put anything. You stack it in there. And then in the third one, this is where you put your kitchen waste and the worms. When you put the kitchen waste and the worms here, you stack it in here so that now the worms are able to move up and down. So after some times, the worms will have completely eaten all the compost, all the waste here, and converted it into compost. And because you want to continue with the composting process, now you remove this bucket and you bring it here in the middle and bring this other empty bucket here where you put in fresh kitchen waste. So the essence is for the worms to come from where they were doing decomposition earlier on and come to where we have the fresh material. So why we are putting this bucket in here is to make it easier for you to harvest the compost. So when you do this process, you don't have to harvest the worms. The worms will naturally move from the bucket that is in the middle and come on top here to continue with the decomposition process. So in the process of doing the composting, we usually have what we call some vermiliquid, some liquid that will now trickle down from the two buckets as the composition is happening, and it settles on this bucket that we have here. And this bucket, like we said earlier, it has a small tap and you can harvest the vermiliquid. And this one, we use it as a foliar fertilizer. It is very rich and you can dilute it 1 liter into 8 liters of water, and you can use it for your farming process. So this is how you do a simple do-it-yourself vermicomposting unit at home. So in summary, you have 3 buckets stacked together. You start with putting your compost in here, and then after some times, after the decomposition is complete, you exchange so that now the worms will move from here to the top bucket, and you continue with your compost making. With this process, within 6 weeks, you are able to have your compost. And this is how you make a simple vermicomposting unit at home. Then the third option is by using the vermibeds that George has explained in details, and that is how you start vermicomposting at home.